Welcome to Red Eyes Radio, ladies and gentlemen, new or regular listeners. It is always great to have you with us. My name is Henrik, and the website is redeyescreations.com. The place to go if you want to know more about our radio program and follow along in our frequently updated news on and about all the things that we think is worth some of your attention, some of the topics and areas that we think are very, very interesting and important to keep an eye on. On our website, you can also find videos, webcasts, films, and video interviews that we have available up there for you. So do check it out. It's redeyescreations.com. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about life after death. We're going to discuss quantum physics, precognitive dreams, psychic resonance, neurology of time perception, and we might go into a little bit later as well about the mystery of the photon. We had a lot of things to discuss today with author Anthony Peake. He has written a book called Is There Life After Death, and also another book titled The Daemon. The website that you can take a look at is simply anthonypeake.com, and the last name is spelled P-E-A-K-E. So it's anthonypeake.com. You can also take a look at his blog, which you can reach at cheatingtheferryman.blogspot.com. We will have these links up on our website, so you can find them easily. And we have quite many different areas here to discuss today. So let's bring on our guest right away and get this program started. Welcome to Red Eyes Radio, Anthony. Very nice of you to come on our program today.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
We're very glad to have you here. Thank you for spending some of your time with us. I would like to, as a way of introduction here at the beginning, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about some of the areas and research that you've been doing, both through books, of course, but give us an outline of some of the main areas that you've been looking into, and I guess we can call it kind of your main thesis or main theory, Anthony.
Okay. The theory behind both of my books, I term it cheating the ferryman. Now, by cheating the ferryman, what I mean is that probably you guys who are aware of the ancient Greek myths will know the story of the river Styx and the idea of Charon the boatman. Now, what you probably are not aware of is that in ancient Greek times, what used to happen was that the family of the deceased person would place a small coin called an obolus underneath the tongue of the recently deceased person. The reason they would do this is the obolus was supposed to be a payment, because when the person found themselves in the netherworld, as it were, they would find themselves in front of a river, and the mists would open, and a boatman would appear. And they would realize that they'd have to pay the boatman to cross the river Styx into the land of the dead, Hades. And what they'd do is they'd take the coin and they'd pay the ferryman, and the ferryman would take them over to the land of no return. Now, what I suggest in my theory is that, like most myths, there is a grain of truth, a story within the story there. And I suggest that something very peculiar happens to human consciousness at the point of death, which allows us to cheat the ferryman. We don't pay him. It was interesting when you mentioned that I deal with life after death. That's probably a misconception, because I don't. I deal with a potential scientific scenario that suggests that we may all be immortal, and we in fact never die because we never get to the point of death. And that is the idea of cheating the ferryman. Now, what is even more interesting about this ancient myth is that it also used to be believed, and this is little known, the ancient Greeks also believed that you could, under certain circumstances, return back to life and live your own life again. And it's a very important point. This doesn't mean reincarnation. What the ancient Greeks believed, particularly the Stoics, was that you would go back and live your own life, a literal recreation of your own life from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. Now, in order to do that, you had to drink the waters of another river, which was called the Lethe. Lethe. And that was called the River of Forgetting. And the idea was that you would drink the waters and you'd go back to live your life again, having completely forgotten you've lived it before. Now, in effect, that's what my theory, cheating the ferryman, suggests. The reason, well, it's difficult to explain, but effectively what I've done is I've gone into the science. the hard science, the neurology, what happens to the brain at the point of death. I've been dealing with a new form of science called consciousness studies, which deals with how the human brain processes reality, how the human brain presents reality to whatever's inside our head that we call me or I. I'm also dealing with the phenomenon known as near-death experience.
Yes.
And what happens when you have a near-death experience. I'm also dealing with certain neurotransmitters in the brain called glutamate. And all these things tie in together for the most amazing explanation for not just near-death experience, but virtually every single unusual phenomenon that most people report. Indeed, my book was recently reviewed in Fortean Times, the international magazine, by Bob Rickard, who was the founder. And Bob Rickard gave the book 9 out of 10. And he said it was a simply amazing, completely refreshing new idea about the nature of consciousness and the nature of reality. It's really, really very, very powerful stuff.
Very interesting. And you, of course, contacted me in regards to some of the work that Jim Elvidge has done, who we had on the show,
Yes.
talking about the possibility that we might be living in a programmed reality. And is that a theory that you think is viable in that sense, or are you still considering that this is an organic process still in one way, and the brain is the decoder of this of the program, so to speak?
I think that Jim's theory and mine are very, very similar in many, many ways. In fact, you may be aware that there has been a book written called The Physics of Immortality. And this deals with exactly the same idea, that humanity over millions and millions of years will evolve to having computing power so powerful that they can recreate the past, and they can recreate in a computer program every living being that has ever existed. And we could be existing within that program. And this again is written by, a top physicist. It's not, and his name escapes me, but I think it's Wheeler. Came up with this idea. I may be wrong on that, but I need to check on that. But effectively, I think the organic theory, which I'm coming from, and the machine theory that Jim suggests have so much synergy. I think effectively we're probably using the terminology wrongly. I think that effectively it's the same thing, because I argue that we are existing in a three-dimensional recreation of our lives that is generated by the brain, using probably digital techniques and holography, because I argue that the world we are living in, or 70% of us, in the sense that if you get a déjà vu sensation, you're living in the illusion. If you don't get déjà vus, which 30% of individuals don't, you're putting down the records for the first time. If you're living in the illusion, the term I use for this illusion is called the Bohmian IMAX. And I use this term because there is an American, or was an American scientist, philosopher called David Bohm. And David Bohm died around about 15, 20 years ago, I think. But he came up with some phenomenal theories about the nature of reality and the reality below the reality, something he called the implicate order. But effectively, I argue that his theories were valid and that we are all existing in this illusion, a bit like the Matrix movies, I suppose. Right.
Well, that's an analogy that keeps coming up, and I guess it's a good one. Do you think that, in regards to time, and I guess we can talk about this from the perspective of déjà vu again, do you think that we can break out from the illusion during this lifetime, or can we only do that then at that point of death where you're talking about the ferryman again, that you don't pay him, and in that sense you're going to break out of the illusion? Or how does it work?
I think the issue with time is a subtly different thing, and it's I've put a few postings on my forum over the last few days on the very issue of time perception. I suppose because I'm building up, because I'm doing a platform event at the National Theatre in London on the 24th of July, and I'll be on stage with particle physicist Professor Jeff Forshaw, and in that I'll be discussing time, its perception, the psychology of time, the philosophy of time, and the nature of time itself, when you take into account the latest implications from particle physics, and the idea that time in the world of particle physics doesn't exist. Time is an illusion. It's a mind-created illusion. So therefore, we could be existing in many, many different types of time. I always use the analogy of people, and I say, you wake up in the morning, the alarm clock goes off, and then you put it on doze for 2 or 3 minutes. You go back to sleep, and you can have a whole dream in that short period of time when the alarm goes off again. Mm. It's as if time dilates, and the brain can dilate time. I cite an amazing example, which was written up about 100 years ago by a guy called Alfred Maury, who was a French psychologist. And Maury, when he was a very young man, had a really long dream, and he dreamt that he was in the French Revolution. And initially he was a member of the Robespierre clique, and he fell foul of them. And they had a whole story about his life, and he falls foul of them, and he ends up being tried. And there's this massive show trial that he dreams about, that he lives through. He defends himself. He's found guilty. He's driven through the streets of Paris in a tumbril. He's taken to the Place de la Concorde, the Place de la Bastille, I suppose, and he is about to be guillotined. Mm. He places his head on the guillotine, and as he does so, he feels the guillotine hit on the back of his neck. And he woke up, and what had happened was the bed board had fallen and hit him on the back of the neck. He'd back created a whole dream based upon something that had happened instantaneously. That's the power of the brain, and that is the power and the illusion of time. As Buddhists say and philosophers say, you can break out of time by getting yourself into certain mental states. Mm. So time is an illusion.
That's very interesting. I recognize that thing with the dream, because I've had that experience myself many times when you hear a noise in the quote-unquote real world, and then that is incorporated instantaneously into the dream, and it starts to work itself together in unison with the dream. And for example, the alarm bell or whatever it might be. I think there is even actually one of those scenes in The Matrix where the alarm bell goes off, right? And he wakes up to that. What do you think what does that mean to you in that regard? Does it mean that we can, experience, or rather what we experience here is just hasn't to do anything with time? If we think about it in terms of aging or, I guess, biological decay, is that just part of the program that we're experiencing, and can we even break free from that? Or what do you think?
There's a possibility we may do. I mean, the issue I have with that is that I suppose we're getting into areas of supposition. What I always try to do is to stay as best I can within the science, in that we, on my forum and on my blog site, we play around with theories, and we will come out and spin out with these ideas all over the place. But effectively, if we can't show it to be scientifically valid, we tend to put it to the side, and we tend to put it as part of philosophy or theology. Not saying that philosophy and theology is not important, but it's a different way of viewing things. What we're trying to do with Cheating the Ferryman is to try and come up with a solid base theory that we can take to scientists, who will turn around and say, well, yes, it does make sense. Indeed, we have particle physicists on my forum, and I'm in touch with quite a few particle physicists around the world as well, because they're very intrigued by the implications for particle physics for the things we're doing at the moment and the ideas we're generating. But I have to keep stressing to everybody listening out there, this is a theory. Yes. It is nothing more than that. It was how it started was, and I suppose that's where we're needing to move to now, is that around about 10, 11 years ago, I wanted to write a book, but I didn't know what I wanted to write about. It's one of these curious driving feelings I had that I needed to write a book. And the thing that really drew me in was déjà vu, because I really wanted to know exactly what déjà vu was as a sensation, what it really meant neurologically, and was